Welcome to the Dental Team Podcast. I'm your host, Kiera Dent, and I have this crazy idea that maybe I could combine a doctor and a team member's perspective because let's face it, dentistry can be a challenging profession with those two perspectives. I've been a dental assistant, treatment coordinator, scheduler, biller, office manager, regional manager, practice owner, and I have a team of traveling consultants where we have traveled to over 165 different offices coaching teams. Yep, we don't just understand you, we are you. Our mission is to positively impact the world of dental, and I believe that this podcast is the greatest way I can help elevate teams, grow VIP experiences, reduce stress, and create A-teams. Welcome to the Dental Team Podcast. Hey guys! All right, today's episode is sponsored by Studio 88, dentistry's story-driven marketing agency. They are incredible. You guys, if you don't know them, Josh and Joanna Scott are some of my absolute favorite people. And they actually just did a website for me and our team. And it was one of the easiest processes. They were able to figure out what I wanted. How they did it, I'm still not sure. They sent me story brands and just these different boards that made it so easy. And it literally was exactly what I wanted. And I love what they say because they say that traditional dental marketing doesn't attract new patients because it doesn't accurately represent your practice. When a patient lands on a templated website with stock photos and clunky design, they have nothing to connect to and they leave. Don't lose patients you've never even met. The team at Studio 88 creates a digital presence that is authentically you, so patients trust you and your team from the moment they encounter your brand. They bring your story to life and get attention with beautiful websites, real photography and video, and a digital strategy that works because your story is worth it. Thank you, Studio 88. Pop on over, guys, and learn more about them at Studio 88's website at S8, the number 8, E as in Edward, 8.com. That's S8E8.com. Hello, Dental Team listeners. This is Kiera, and you guys, as always, please, before we get started and get too far into this, pop on over, leave us a review, let us know how much you love our podcast, share with your friends, because sharing is caring, guys. And just like you want to grow your practices, we want to grow this podcast because our mission is to positively impact the world of dentistry, and you guys can help on that mission. I always love when I get to feel like I'm a part of something bigger than me, so hopefully you guys do too. All right, you guys, today I want to dive into how can you get your team members to want to be better? Oh gosh, I don't know where that topic just came from, but it's coming. It's on this drive. You guys know I love to podcast, carcast. It's what we call it over here, carcasting while I'm driving back from my mom's house. All right, so how can you get team members to want to be better? Yes, I'm going to tie this to the podcast because a lot of times people just need to be exposed to something enough times and then they become it. I did not used to love to read, you guys. I just was talking to my therapist today. Yes, it's okay. You can have a therapist, you guys. You should have a therapist. They're amazing. I love my therapist. It took me like 4 times to find a great therapist. Today we were talking about some things and she was asking me who I was in 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, like back to childhood. And I was telling her because, you know, I've got this ever constant theme in my head that Kiera Dent is not good enough. Don't worry, I don't need fanfare. If you guys want to send me a great email, go for it. I do love you guys when you send emails. I really do read them, and you guys are freaking amazing fans. So hello@thedentalteam.com. You guys can email us. But I'm not telling you this because I need the fanfare. I'm just telling you that this is a constant recurring theme in my mind that Kiera Dent is not good enough. Okay? So in therapy, we were talking about it today. And we're talking about how when I was younger, I grew up with 4 brothers. And you guys, I didn't used to like to read at all. I didn't feel like I was a good reader. I don't know if you guys had this. If anybody had it, please email me. I do want to hear from you on this one. If you had a program reader in 1st grade, that thing was the bane of my existence, you guys. I hated this program reader. And my therapist today is like, what's a program reader? And what it was is it was a book and it had this clear piece of plastic that went over the page and it had like a yellow, I can remember the color, a yellow bookmark on the far left of the page, okay? So then there were words on the right side of the page and I had to use a crayon and I would circle the right answers or write in the right answers. And then I'd move this yellow bookmark on the left side down to see if I got the answer right. I wasn't really great at this. I don't know why reading was hard for me. Comprehending, I hated. Oh, you guys remember those like word math problems where you had to read like Sally got 5 apples and Johnny got 6 apples. How many apples do they have together? Those were the worst for me. I don't know why. And we were talking about it. And because I didn't think I was a good reader, I wouldn't read books. My mom wanted to give me books for Christmas and I didn't want to read them ever. And I thought I wasn't a good reader. I thought that I wasn't smart. So for a long time in my life, I've told myself that I'm not good at reading. Well, guess what? I'm actually really good at reading and I actually really enjoy it. And Mark Costas told me, Kiera, you should try Audible. And I said, forget you, Mark. I hate reading. And so this is like in my 30s, guys. Not even as a young teenager. This is in my 30s. Well, then I discovered Audible. And Audible, I put it on 2.5 to 3 times the speed because I like to see how fast I can listen, because it's actually hard for me to understand and it forces me to understand because they're talking so quickly. So I didn't think I used to like to read. And now my whole world is open. You guys, I try to read at least 1 book a month, if not 2 or 3 books a month. And reading them on 2 to 3 times the speed, I get through a lot of information and I can consume information so quickly and understand it and digest it. That's just how I do it. But for so long, I didn't think I was good at it. So I just had to be exposed to different ways. And then voila, I really enjoy reading now. I actually have book clubs now. Crazy. The girl who thought she was stupid, thought she wasn't good enough. The girl who thought she wasn't a good reader is somebody who's running book clubs and consumes them. And I'm actually in the process of writing a book. There we go. It's out there. Dun, 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 dun. Right? That's like, who am I? So how do you get team members to be better? Sure, we can motivate, but motivation dies out. We got to inspire them. So with inspiration, what I would recommend is you guys can have team members start listening to the podcast, exposing them. My husband did not ever want to grow a business. He told me, no. Well, for years, I've talked to him about a business and now Jason's starting a business. That's pretty incredible. Things that I didn't ever think he'd be, but I think a lot of times it's exposure. So docs, team members listening to this podcast, you're already in the zone. So I want to give you guys some tactical things of how you can get team members to want to be better. And I think it's by exposing them to things that inspire and ignite them, even if they might be a little resistant to it at the beginning. So what I mean by that, some examples are the podcast. I've heard of offices having team members say, I don't want to listen to the podcast. If I listen to the podcast, does that mean I've got to get paid for it? And the reality is the podcast is free information to make you better at your job. It's a way to invest in yourself. And that's why we made this podcast. So I've heard of offices trying to get their team members involved and engaged in podcast listening. And I want to share with you guys some ideas because again, it might just be some exposure. I didn't think I'd be great at listening to podcasts. I didn't think I'd want to listen to podcasts. And then I started listening to them. And then I really started to like them. And I just needed that first little oomph to push me off of what I didn't think I didn't even know. I just didn't think I'd like it. So some offices have done, they call it the podcast challenge. So what a doctor did, and he told me, Kiera, this was seriously the best thing I've ever done because now my team loves to listen to the podcast and they're growing and their minds are expanding and they're being inspired. And my team and my office and my practice are completely different and we're evolving and morphing. And I was like, that is so cool. So first steps first, what they did in that practice was they had 5 podcasts. I think they chose 5 different podcasts. And they said, okay, we are going to run a quiz. So at the end of this week, we're going to have a quiz. And whomever gets the answers right is going to get $20. Okay, so I think they did like a $20 gift card. That's it. And he said his team was listening to the podcast on their break. The team was like ravishly taking content, taking notes. And then he had 5 questions at the end of the week on these 5 different podcasts. And he just pulled them. And whomever got them right got $20. He said he did it for 2 or 3 weeks. He said, I think he spent $300. And he said, that was the best investment I ever did because my team started consuming information. They started realizing how much the podcast could benefit them. Because a lot of times, you guys, when I heard podcast, I was like, podcast schmodcast. Like, I'm not listening to that. That's for old people. That's for doctors who wanted to get all their CE. That's not for me as a team member. I didn't realize that there was stuff out there for me as a team member that would grow me personally, that grow me professionally, that I actually would enjoy, that was fun. It wasn't too long. I could have fun with it. I didn't know that existed. And so this team was able to do that. Another way a team got their team to start listening to the podcast and exposing them to different things. Because I will tell you guys, if you can get your team on the podcast, it's a very easy, simple way to get into personal development. Then you can start running book clubs. Then you can start running personal development. Then it starts to change them because what you consume, what you think, what's in your mind is who you become. So that's the power of this. It's why we built a podcast, you guys, because this is a way that we can grow people's minds. We can give them help in their practices and we can change your whole entire team. So another team, what they did is they did podcast bingo back to school. So they had a bunch of things and they would play bingo. So whichever like word, and they made up some bingo cards, and whatever word I said in certain podcasts. So they'd give out like a few podcasts. And when I heard it, they'd play bingo. Or they did it during a lunch meeting. Podcast bingo is a pretty fun one. Another one was a back to school. So they had back to school, and they gave out a couple different podcasts, and they had their team members come prepared with something that they could give their patients going back to school. Another office, they would listen to the podcast. Some did it during a lunch meeting, and they would talk about it, and they would use that, and they would play it. I've played Tony Robbins, you guys, in my team meetings. We have listened to, I actually did an office coaching consulting where I had the team listen to a 20, 30 minute Tony Robbins, and we listened to it, and then we talked about it, and we made an action item off of it. So those are some of the ways that offices have gotten more team members to be exposed to the podcast as one of the easiest steps into personal development. I'm working with, I wasn't intentional, but I have a friend, and her daughter was really struggling. So I was like, well, what is she going to need? And I talked to her about some different things. And then I realized I just invited her over to come start working out with me. She came over and started working out, and I decided when she came over that I was going to have her write in a journal with me. Every morning, guys, I'll say like 85% of the time, I write in a journal in the morning. It's my gratitude journal, my accomplishments, my improvements, my self-love, something I love about myself, the joy from the day before, and my 3 results to accomplish for that day, along with my goals that I want to accomplish for that year. I literally write this every single day. So this girl was struggling, and I decided, hey, this is something that helped me, and I believe what we focus on is what we become. What we consume is who we become. So I said, hey, I got you a journal. I give you one. I'll show you how I do it, and you can try it if it works for you. So I actively did it with her. I didn't just tell her how to do it. I did it with her. She's been journaling every single day for the last couple of weeks. And it might not be immediate results. They say in Atomic Habits, he gave a great example of an ice cube. And that ice cube sitting in a room at 25 degrees. Well, water melts at 32 degrees. So you're sitting there, and this ice cube's staying frozen, and the temperature rises from 25 to 26, 27, 30, all the way up to 30. Nothing has happened. This ice cube is still freaking frozen. Then 31 degrees. And then we hit that beautiful 32 degrees. And in an instant of miraculousness, we feel that ice cube all of a sudden melted, and it was like, oh my gosh, this moment. The reality was we'd been working hard, and we'd been putting in the effort, and we'd been growing this room to get this ice cube to melt. Well, it's the exact same thing for our minds and for who we are as people. We might not see an immediate reaction in our team. We might not see a change in profitability immediately. We're putting in those small steps, and then all of a sudden one day, boom, that ice cube will melt. Your team will change. Your culture will change. The morale will change. You'll start to have people thinking and empowering and inspiring because that's who they want to become. That's who you've become. What you are, what you say to yourself, that's who you become. So you get a culture in your office of personal development, of striving for the next level. You share ideas, ask them to share their ideas. And when you start to build that type of a culture in your practice and just build it in. So ways you can just build it in. You could have like podcast takeaway in the morning. So you ask people, you say, okay, we're going to have a random drawing, put everyone's names in a hat every single day. So it could be the same person every single day. You just pull a name out. All right, Kiera, what was your podcast takeaway from yesterday? I really love that we talked about personality tests. Okay. Whatever it is, and say like, this was the example. This was my takeaway. Well, if they know they're going to get called on in morning huddle, guess what? They're going to start listening because it's going to be really uncomfortable if they're called on and they didn't listen. Other things you can do, you can add it to a book club Wednesday. So maybe on a Wednesday lunch meeting, you have a book club and everybody talks about what they're learning. When people do things together, you become more unified, meaning when you have a shared experience, so everybody listens to the same podcast, everybody reads the same book, you start to have a common verbiage and understanding and connection that you didn't otherwise have. So these types of things will start to change and morph your practice. And this is how you get people to want to be better. You expose them to it. And guess what? The people that don't want to be a part of this, they will definitely jump ship. They will change. And the people who do, even the people that are kind of on the fencers, that don't know if they do, don't know if they don't, they're going to start to be influenced. It's going to start to become a culture. It's going to start to become a way of living. They always say you become like the 5 people you associate with the most. Okay, so that's who you become. So if you want your team to be this way, You've got to start to have a culture like that because you're all hanging out together a lot. You become like each other a lot. So you influence and infiltrate your practice, and then your practice becomes one of personal development, of doing good, of being better, of striving for more. I also think one-on-one personal check-ins every single month. And I don't just check in on job. I check in on who they are as people. What are you doing to grow yourself? That's a legit question I ask my team. What are you doing to grow yourself personally and professionally? It's kind of weird, but I want them to think about that because then when I talk to them the next month, what are you doing to grow yourself personally and professionally? It also helps me know the things that they're interested in, and it also makes them accountable for growing themselves personally and professionally. That could be one of your core values, growth. Growth could be a core value where you're constantly looking to innovate and improve and to become the next best version of yourself, whatever it is. So there's some ideas, you guys. I would challenge all of you to get your team members to listen to the podcast. It's a simple, easy way to go in. Add a book club in if you're already doing it. You guys could do the podcast morning huddle. You could add it to your weekly meetings. There's a million different ways. You could try podcast bingo. You could do the $20 raffle, whatever it is. You guys try it out because when you start to give them opportunities to excel and become better versions of themselves, they'll either take the opportunity or they won't. But kind of sometimes have to push them out of the nest, get them to grow, and then start to build a culture of growth. That is when your practice will start to change. Remember, went from 25 degrees all the way up to 31 before they saw any difference. And then from 31 to 32 is where the magic happened. All right, you guys, if you have ideas of how you've gotten your team to listen to the podcast, or you've got ways that your team does personal development, or you've found ways to get your team to really be inspired and to be growing and evolving, email us. I'd love to hear your ideas. I'd love to hear what you're doing, and we'll share best practices. Email us hello@thedentallyteam.com. Can't wait to hear from you guys. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time on the Dental Team Podcast.
And that wraps it up for another episode of the Dental Team Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.